Everybody had access to it. You didn't have to have a press pass or be, you know, a celebrity to walk down the pit lane. It's a nostalgia thing, isn't it? It's just generated a lot of interest. You've only got to see all the people here, vast numbers of people, and buying books galore. Well, the first book was Reflections of a Lost Era. Give that a plug. There it is. I'm sure you've seen it many times. And that all revolved around a lot of pictures which I'd taken in the 50s and the early 60s, both in the UK and particularly abroad, which is what was the real interest, I think. Pictures taken at circuits we don't use now, like Reims and Rouen, places like that. Also at Le Mans I went to in 1958 and 1963. So I had a whole load of pictures and I wanted to get them published so that I could share them with other people.
How successful was that book?
Right, well, it was reprinted. It started off with 2,500 print run, and then it was reprinted in February 07, and it's done very well. And I've had so many nice comments about it. Fortunately, it was reviewed, got good reviews in the press, particularly the motoring mags. That's very important. Everybody seemed to like it, and that really started the ball rolling. So I sold a lot of books myself independently because we belonged to a motor club, Steve Wyatt's club actually, Oily Rag Club. So sold a number of books there. So it was very successful. And as a lead on from that, the BRM trophies, which had been in the boardroom at Rubery Owens headquarters in Birmingham, they were being transferred to a museum at Bourne, which is where the BRMs were built. That was the home of BRM, Bourne in Lincolnshire, in the middle of the Fens. And they had a ceremony with the Lady Mayoress there to unveil these trophies so that they could be seen by a wider audience. And this little wizened old man came up to me and he said, "I've been looking for you, I want you to help me." So I said, "Yes, well, in what way? Can I find a chair for you?" He said, no, I want you to help me with my book. So he said, I worked for BRM in the 50s and the 60s, and I've written my story and I just want to get it published, and can you help me? On the strength of, you know, what happened with your book Reflections. So it all kicked off from there really, and I helped Dick with his book. Rod published it. BRM A Mechanic's Tale. I believe that sold very well. It's certainly a lovely book. Well, Steve Wyatt, Brands Hatcher historic event in May 06, wasn't it? 06, yes it was, 2006, 4 years ago, I can't believe it. He said, look, I've got this huge stack of prints, photographs taken in the 60s, could you find me a publisher with your experience, etc, etc. So it all kicked in from there, and I said, look, I'd like to help with your book, you've got the photographs, I'll write the text. And that was the agreement. Well then of course it expanded from then, because Steve's got 400 photos which is captioning. I wrote the text, which tended to be a lot more of a challenge than I expected to be, because I got involved with Bob Dance, who was with Lotus from 1960 and still works for Classic Team Lotus incidentally. He's here today with the IndyCar. Magazines and people have been trying to get Bob Dance to tell his story, and they've had little snippets here and there, but never a continuous narrative. So anyway, I managed to persuade him. He came out of the woods and said, yes, I'll do it. So in his own words, he's told me his story, covering when he was growing up, going to events with his father, taking photographs, some of which I've got access to, and then joining Team Lotus at the same time as Jim Clark, same year, and he worked through the ranks. He ran the Lotus Cortinas in 1962 and 1963 and 1964 with Jim Clark, Jack Sears, Graham Hill driving, and then he became Formula One chief mechanic in 1968. and then he went on to look after the Indy cars in the early 1969, I think it was. And so he's told, we just sat him down with a recorder, just like you're doing, and without any notes, without any hesitation, he just talked for a couple of hours, and I just wrote it out exactly as it was recorded. I hardly had to edit it at all, and his recall talking about those events, you know, nearly 50 years ago, was absolutely staggering. Well, not only that, but he also gave me access to a load of pictures which he'd taken, superb black and white pictures which he'd taken in the 50s, and then these colour shots using Ferrania colour and just an old little 35mm camera. And I'd written a lot about the Mercedes and the auto unions. That's really what the book kicked off with in the 30s, and I needed some pictures, and I wanted new pictures, not pictures that had been seen before. So Bob introduced me to a guy called David Morris, who restores ERAs. He's probably one of the biggest ERA names from the point of view of restoration in the country. So he said, I know you will get some ERA pictures from him. So I got in touch with him, and he has the copyright and owns the albums of pictures of a guy called Reggie Tongue, who drove an ERA as an amateur driver in the late 1930s, and he has 3 albums packed full of black and white pictures. And I've got all these pictures, got access to them. Very few of those pictures have been seen before, and I've got access to them. So I've used about 70 of those pictures. It kicks off with the very origins of the sport in the very early 1900s, these city-to-city races that you had abroad, like Paris to Madrid. People got killed, just dust tracks. They had some dreadful accidents, and obviously that had to be phased out, and car races had to be run on closed circuits, albeit roads, but closed. And then of course what I really started writing about is the auto unions and Mercedes at Donington Park in 1937 and 38, set in the political context of the time. What I did after the V16 chapter was to relate the grassroots expansion of motorsport after the war, because there was no money about. People were still running cars which they'd run before the war, and just a very low-key, cheap form of motorsport was the 500s, just a Norton motorcycle, engine stuck in the back of a little chassis, which was built by homeowners like myself or somebody. But then, of course, John Cooper got in on the act and made a much more professional job of it. Built a production run of cars which people like Sterling Moss and Peter Collins drove in the late 40s and started off on their careers. And so that's really when it ends as far as volume 1 is concerned, because I've taken the story up to 1962, and from 62 onwards until 72 then it's Steve Wyatt's volume 2, which is something like in excess of 400 photographs, all taken during the 60s, all categories of racing, Formula 1, GT, saloons, the whole concept. Again, opportunities which you wouldn't have now, because you could get into the paddock, see all the people close to and the cars close to, and all the pictures are there, which are very expansive and informative captions, which he was very keen to do, to tell people the nuts and bolts, not just a journalistic 15 word caption, if as many as that. He wants to be informative and has done a very good job of it. So volume 2 is a natural transgression from volume 1. Put another way, volume 1 feeds in a sort of seamless follow on into volume 2, and that's why Rod wanted to do it in 2 volumes, and it's absolutely the right thing to do, because otherwise it would have been a huge book which would have been unaffordable to the people who wanted to buy it. And it also separates my work from Steve's work, which was absolutely the right way to do it.